Daiichi's practice blade hovers at his opponent's throat. The veteran samurai stares in disbelief, while Lord Takeda's entire household watches in stunned silence. A servant just defeated one of the Lord's best warriors. Impossible. Yet here stands Daiichi, trembling not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what comes next. If Lord Takeda refuses Kenshin's request, this victory means nothing. Daiichi will remain invisible, trapped in servitude, while the Ronin who transformed him leaves forever. Kenshin stands motionless in the shadows, dark eyes unreadable. 6 brutal weeks of secret training, stolen nights of forbidden intimacy, a bond that defies every rule of their world. All of it balances on one man's decision. Lord Takeda rises. His mouth opens. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. Daiichi had known cold before, the kind that settled into bones during mountain winters, that made fingers stiff around practice swords at dawn, that turned breath to mist in the servants' quarters where he slept on thin tatami. But the cold he felt now, standing in the courtyard of the Takeda estate with spring blossoms drifting through warm air, came from somewhere deeper. It was the cold of being invisible, of being 20 years old and still untouched by purpose or passion, of watching life happen to everyone around him while he remained frozen in place. He had been born to a minor samurai family, too low in rank to matter, too poor to maintain their ancestral home after his father died in some border skirmish Daiichi barely remembered. His mother had scraped together enough to send him to the Takeda household as a servant when he was 14, hoping he might learn enough to become a scribe, or perhaps, if the gods smiled, attract the attention of someone who could sponsor him as a proper retainer. 6 years later, Daiichi had learned calligraphy and tea ceremony, and how to move silently through halls so the important people never noticed him. He had learned how to be invisible. The Takeda estate sprawled across a hillside overlooking a valley of rice fields, its walls high and defensible, its gardens meticulously maintained. Lord Takeda commanded respect throughout the province. His samurai feared for their skill, his household run with military efficiency. Daiichi existed at the lowest level of this hierarchy, one of dozens of young men who performed the tedious work that kept the estate functioning. He fetched water and swept floors and copied documents in his careful hand. He bowed deeply to everyone and spoke only when spoken to, and tried not to want things he could never have. The wanting was the worst part. Daiichi had learned to ignore hunger, to function on little sleep, to endure the casual cruelty of higher-ranked servants who enjoyed reminding him of his place. But he could not ignore the hollow ache inside him that grew larger with each passing year. The sense that he was meant for something more than this half-life of service and silence. The yearning for connection, for purpose, for someone to truly see him instead of looking through him like he was made of paper. He kept these feelings buried deep, locked behind the pleasant, empty expression he wore like armor. No one needed to know that Daiichi spent his nights lying awake, staring at ceiling beams and wondering what it would feel like to matter to someone. To be wanted, chosen, claimed by someone strong enough to make him feel safe and significant. These were foolish dreams for someone in his position, and Daiichi knew it. So he pushed them down and focused on surviving another day, another week, another year of invisibility. Everything changed the day the Ronin arrived. Daiichi had been in the main courtyard, on his hands and knees scrubbing the stone path that led to the reception hall. It was mindless work, the kind that let his thoughts drift while his hands moved automatically. The spring sun was warm on his back, cherry blossoms floating down to land on wet stone, and Daiichi was thinking about nothing in particular when he heard the gate guards challenge someone. The voice that answered made Daiichi's hands still against stone. It was deep and rough, like gravel grinding together, but controlled in a way that suggested immense restraint. The voice of a man who could shout commands across a battlefield, but chose to speak quietly because he had no need to prove his authority to anyone. Daiichi looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. The man walking through the gate was enormous. Not just tall, though he stood well over 6 feet in an era where most men barely reached Daichi's shoulder, but massive in his presence. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step deliberate and economical, wasting no energy on unnecessary motion. His body beneath simple travel-worn clothing was lean but powerfully muscled, the build of someone who had spent years training with weapons. His hair was long and dark, pulled back in a simple tie, and his face could have been carved from stone. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes so dark they looked black, scanning his surroundings with the casual alertness of someone who expected threats from any direction. He carried 2 swords, the mark of samurai rank, but no clanmon decorated his clothing. A Ronin then, a masterless samurai, wandering without lord or home. Such men were common enough in these troubled times, but this one radiated something different. Power, Daichi thought. Authority that came from within, rather than from any title or position. This was a man who had commanded others, who had killed and survived, who carried himself like someone who answered to no one. The Ronin's eyes swept across the courtyard, and for one heart-stopping moment, they landed on Daichi. The impact of that gaze felt physical, like being struck. Dark eyes that saw everything, that stripped away pretense and looked directly at the truth beneath. Daichi felt naked under that scrutiny, felt seen for the first time in years, and the intensity of it made his heart hammer against his ribs. Then the moment passed. The Ronin's gaze moved on, dismissing Daichi as beneath notice, and Daichi returned to scrubbing stone with hands that shook slightly. He told himself it was fear. The man looked dangerous, deadly, like violence barely leashed. Of course Daichi was afraid. That was only natural. But it was not fear that made his pulse race. It was not fear that made him unable to stop glancing toward where the Ronin had disappeared into the main hall. It was not fear that made him acutely aware of how he looked, on his knees in servant's clothing with his hands rough from work, utterly insignificant compared to the magnificent warrior who had just walked past him like he was furniture. Daichi scrubbed harder, trying to focus on the task, trying not to think about dark eyes that had looked at him for barely a second, trying not to wonder what it would be like to be truly seen by someone like that, to matter to someone that powerful. Over the following days, Daichi learned the Ronin's name through kitchen gossip. Kenshin, no family name, just the single word that meant sword heart. He had served as a captain in the army of a daimyo whose lands had been conquered 3 years ago, had fought to the last before his lord committed seppuku and released his retainers from service. Since then, Kenshin had wandered, selling his sword to various lords for short campaigns, never staying anywhere long, never swearing permanent loyalty to anyone. Lord Takeda had hired him to train the household samurai, recognizing the value of a warrior with Kenshin's reputation and experience. Kenshin would stay through the summer, drilling the men in advanced techniques, and then move on. It was a practical arrangement, beneficial to both parties, nothing more. Daichi told himself he had no reason to think about Kenshin at all. Their worlds barely overlapped. Kenshin spent his days in the practice yard with Lord Takeda's samurai, teaching them combinations and strategies. He took his meals with the warriors, slept in the retainers' quarters, moved through the estate with the confidence of someone who belonged in its higher circles. Daichi was nobody, nothing, a servant who cleaned floors and copied documents. They might as well have existed on different planes of reality. Yet Daichi found himself drawn to the practice yard during his brief rest periods, watching from the shadows as Kenshin moved through sword forms with deadly grace. The man was mesmerizing in motion, his body fluid and precise, every strike perfectly balanced. He did not shout or berate his students when they made mistakes, simply demonstrated the correct technique again, with infinite patience, until they understood. His teaching style was quiet but absolute, expecting obedience without needing to demand it. The samurai responded to him with respect bordering on reverence, eager to please this legendary warrior, even though he held no official rank over them. Watching Kenshin work made Daichi's chest ache with yearning he did not fully understand. He wanted to be down there on the training ground, wanted those dark eyes to watch him with that same focused intensity, wanted to learn from those hands how to move with purpose and power. But more than that, he wanted to be the kind of person who merited Kenshin's attention. Someone strong, capable, worthy of notice instead of invisible and insignificant. These thoughts were dangerous, and Daichi knew it. He forced himself to stop lingering near the practice yard, threw himself into his work with renewed focus, tried to forget the way Kenshin's muscles moved beneath sweat-dampened clothing, tried not to imagine what that rough voice would sound like saying his name. It was futile. Daichi had spent years successfully not wanting anything, and now he wanted with an intensity that frightened him. He wanted to be seen, to be chosen, to belong to someone strong enough to make him feel like he mattered. And against all logic and reason, he wanted that someone to be Kenshin. 2 weeks after the Ronin's arrival, Daichi was carrying documents to Lord Takeda's study when he turned a corner and nearly collided with a wall of muscle. He stumbled back, an apology already forming on his lips, and looked up into Kenshin's dark eyes. This close, the man was overwhelming. Taller than Daichi by nearly a head, smelling of sword oil and clean sweat and something indefinably masculine. His presence seemed to fill the corridor, making the air feel thick and charged. Daichi's mouth went dry, words dying unspoken. Kenshin looked down at him with that same penetrating gaze that had struck Daichi in the courtyard. This time, it did not move on. This time, it lingered, traveling slowly from Daichi's face, down his body, and back up again, and Daichi felt that gaze like a physical touch. His skin heated, his breath quickened, and he stood frozen like prey, caught in a predator's sight. "Watch where you walk," Kenshin said finally, his voice low and rough. "The corridor is narrow here." "Forgive me," Daichi managed, his own voice barely a whisper. He bowed deeply, documents clutched against his chest. "I did not see you?" "No." Kenshin's tone was thoughtful, assessing. "Most people do not see you either, do they?" It was not a question. The observation landed like a blow because it was so precisely true. Daichi kept his head bowed, unable to meet those knowing eyes, unable to form a response. How had Kenshin seen that about him in seconds when no one else had noticed in 6 years? "Look at me." The command was quiet but absolute. Daichi's head came up automatically, instinct responding to the authority in that voice, even as his mind scrambled to process what was happening. Kenshin studied his face with uncomfortable intensity, and Daichi felt stripped bare, all his careful invisibility rendered useless under that penetrating gaze. "What is your name?" Again, not a question. A demand for information Daichi had no choice but to provide. "Daichi," he said. "Just Daichi. I serve in the scribe's hall." Kenshin's eyes narrowed slightly. "You watch the training sometimes, from the shadows by the wall. You think no one notices, but I see you there." Daichi's face heated with embarrassment at being caught. He had thought himself invisible even in his watching, safely hidden in darkness. But of course this man had noticed. Kenshin saw everything. "Forgive me," Daichi said again, helplessly. "I did not mean to intrude. Why do you watch?" The question came sharp and direct, cutting through Daichi's attempts at evasion. "Because you are magnificent," Daichi thought but did not say. "Because watching you makes me feel something other than empty. Because I want things I have no right to want." None of these truths could be spoken aloud, so Daichi grasped for something safer. "I have never seen anyone move like you do. Your technique is beautiful." Something flickered in Kenshin's eyes, too quick for Daichi to identify. Appreciation, perhaps? Or interest? "Do you have any training yourself?" "Very little. My father taught me basic forms before he died, but nothing advanced. I am not strong enough or skilled enough to serve as a warrior." The admission tasted bitter, acknowledging his own inadequacy. Kenshin's gaze traveled down Daichi's body again, assessing with a warrior's eye. "You are young and untested, not weak. There is a difference. Training could make something of you if you were willing to work hard enough." The word sent a thrill through Daichi that he did not fully understand. The idea of Kenshin training him, teaching him, focusing that intense attention on his body and movements, made his heart race and his skin flush with heat that had nothing to do with embarrassment. "I would work very hard," he heard himself say, "if anyone was willing to teach me." The air between them felt suddenly charged, crackling with tension Daichi could not name but felt in every nerve. Kenshin's eyes locked on his, dark and unreadable, and the moment stretched out until Daichi could barely breathe under the weight of it. Then Kenshin stepped back, breaking the strange spell that had fallen over them. "I teach Lord Takeda's retainers, not servants. That is the arrangement. But perhaps if you continue to watch from the shadows, you might learn something useful." He moved past Daichi then, his shoulder brushing against Daichi's in the narrow corridor, and the brief contact sent electricity racing across Daichi's skin. Kenshin's scent enveloped him for a moment, overwhelmingly masculine and intoxicating, and then the Ronin was gone, leaving Daichi trembling against the wall with documents clutched too tightly in his hands. Daichi stood there for long minutes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The encounter felt significant in ways he could not articulate. The way Kenshin had looked at him, spoken to him, acknowledged his existence with such directness. As if Daichi mattered enough to be seen, to be questioned, to be assessed as more than furniture. That night, lying on his thin sleeping mat in the servants' quarters, Daichi replayed every word, every look, every second of that corridor encounter. He told himself he was being foolish, reading too much into a brief exchange. Kenshin had probably already forgotten about it, forgotten about the insignificant servant he had nearly walked into. But Daichi could not forget, could not stop thinking about dark eyes that saw through his invisibility, could not stop imagining what it would be like to have that intense focus directed at him for more than a few moments, to be trained by those hands, shaped by that voice, claimed by that overwhelming presence. The wanting grew sharper, more specific, more impossible to ignore. Daichi wanted Kenshin to see him, truly see him, the way no one else ever had. He wanted to be worthy of that attention, wanted to become someone significant enough to merit being noticed. He wanted things he had no words for, desires his inexperienced mind could barely shape into coherent thoughts. He wanted to belong to Kenshin, to be chosen by him, claimed by him, held in those powerful hands, and told he mattered. The longing was so intense it hurt, a physical ache in his chest that made it hard to breathe. Daichi pressed his face into his thin pillow and tried to will the feelings away. This was madness. Kenshin was a legendary warrior, temporary in his presence here, impossibly far above Daichi's station. And even if by some miracle the Ronin did notice him again, what then? Daichi had nothing to offer. He was nobody, nothing. Just another invisible servant in a household full of them. But despite all logic and reason, hope had taken root, because Kenshin had seen him, had spoken to him as if he mattered, had looked at him with assessing eyes that suggested possibility rather than dismissal. It was more attention than Daichi had received from anyone in years, and it fed the hungry thing inside him that craved recognition and significance. Over the following days, Daichi found himself drawn back to the practice yard despite his attempts at restraint. He no longer watched from deep shadows, but stood more visibly in the covered walkway, not hiding his presence even if he remained carefully out of the way. And sometimes, just sometimes, he would catch Kenshin's eyes on him, a glance that lingered a fraction too long. An acknowledgement that Daichi was there, watching, wanting. The spring deepened into early summer, and with each passing day, the tension inside Daichi wound tighter. He moved through his duties mechanically, his mind always elsewhere, always circling back to Kenshin, to the way the Ronin moved, to the rare times their paths crossed in corridors or courtyards, and Kenshin would nod slightly in acknowledgement, treating Daichi like someone who deserved to be greeted rather than ignored. Small things, Tiny gestures that probably meant nothing to Kenshin but everything to Daichi. Each one fed the hope growing inside him, the dangerous belief that perhaps he could be more than invisible. Perhaps he could matter to someone like Kenshin, if only he could find a way to prove himself worthy of attention. The opportunity came unexpectedly, as such things often do. Daichi was in the garden at twilight, carefully trimming back overgrown branches near the koi pond. The work was soothing, requiring just enough focus to quiet his restless thoughts. The evening air was warm and still, heavy with the scent of jasmine, and Daichi had nearly achieved something like peace when he heard footsteps on the stone path. He turned to find Kenshin approaching, moving with that same fluid grace, dressed in simple hakama and a loose kusode that showed the strong column of his throat. He carried a small sack bottle and 2 cups, and when he saw Daichi, he did not turn away, but continued walking until he stood just a few feet distant. "I did not mean to disturb your work." Kenshin's voice was low, almost gentle in the gathering dusk. "You do not disturb me," Daichi said honestly. He set down his pruning shears and bowed, trying to ignore how his heart had begun racing the moment Kenshin appeared. "The garden is peaceful in the evening. Many people come here to think." Kenshin's eyes moved over him, that same assessing gaze that made Daichi feel exposed and seen simultaneously. "You are always working. I have observed you these past weeks. You move through the estate like a ghost, performing tasks that no one else notices need doing. Why do you not rest?" The question caught Daichi off guard. "Because resting accomplishes nothing. Because staying busy keeps me from thinking too much. Because I have nothing else to do with my time." He chose the simplest truth. "I prefer to be useful." "Useful." Kenshin repeated the word thoughtfully. "You wish to have purpose, to matter in some meaningful way." Daichi felt something crack open inside him at having his deepest desire spoken aloud. He nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. Kenshin moved closer, setting the sake bottle and cups on a nearby stone bench. "I understand that hunger. I have been masterless for 3 years, selling my skills to temporary lords, belonging nowhere. Purpose is what I seek as well, in my own way." The admission felt intimate, a vulnerability shared between equals rather than between warrior and servant. Daichi looked up into Kenshin's face and saw something in those dark eyes he had not seen before. Loneliness, recognition, the acknowledgement that they were not so different despite their vastly different stations. "You are very young," Kenshin continued after a moment, his gaze never leaving Daichi's face. "Untested, you have seen little of the world beyond this estate. Yet you carry yourself with a dignity that suggests inner strength. I have been watching you as closely as you have been watching me." The words sent heat flooding through Daichi's body. Kenshin had been watching him, had noticed him, observed him, assessed him as more than furniture. The knowledge was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "Why?" The question emerged barely above a whisper. "Why would you watch me? I am nobody." Kenshin's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but something warmer than his usual expression. "Because you wish to be somebody. Because you watch me with hunger in your eyes, wanting to learn, wanting to become something more than what you are. That desire is rare and valuable. Most people settle for their assigned place and never dream of transcendence." He picked up the sack bottle and poured 2 cups with steady hands. "They call me master when they wish to show respect, though I hold no official rank. If you would learn from me, if you would allow me to shape you into something more than an invisible servant, then you must call me that as well. You must acknowledge that I have authority over you, that you trust me to push you beyond your limits." Daichi's breath caught. This was an offer, a genuine offer to teach him, to notice him, to make him into someone worthy. Everything he had yearned for these past weeks, presented directly without games or pretense. The only cost was submission, acknowledgement of Kenshin's dominance, and his own willing subservience. He should hesitate, should consider the implications, the risk, the way this would change everything between them. But Daichi had spent 6 years being cautious, invisible, careful not to want too much. Caution had gotten him nowhere. Yes. The word came out firm, despite his racing heart. Yes, master. I want to learn from you. I want you to teach me, to push me, to make me into someone who matters. I will work as hard as you demand. I will submit to your authority completely. Just please, please see me as something more than I am now. The speech tumbled out in a rush, raw honesty stripped of any artifice. Daichi stood trembling in the twilight, his heart laid bare, waiting for Kenshin's response. The Ronin studied him for a long moment, those dark eyes searching his face as if reading every desperate desire written there. Then Kenshin picked up one sack cup and held it out. Drink with me. This is a compact between us now. I will teach you, shape you, give you purpose. In return, you will trust me completely. Your body, your training, your limits are mine to test. Do you accept these terms? Daichi took the cup with shaking hands. His fingers brushed Kenshin's in the exchange, and the brief contact sent electricity racing up his arm. He raised the cup in both hands, meeting Kenshin's eyes directly. I accept, master. I am yours to shape as you see fit. They drank together in the gathering darkness, and Daichi felt the sake burn warm down his throat while something inside him shifted irrevocably. This was a threshold crossed, a commitment made. He belonged to Kenshin now in ways he did not fully understand, but accepted without reservation. When the cups were empty, Kenshin set them aside and moved closer, until barely a foot separated them. This near, Daichi could feel the heat radiating from the Ronin's body, could see the faint scars on his hands and forearms, battle-earned marks of a life lived violently. Kenshin's presence was overwhelming, magnetic, pulling Daichi toward him like gravity. The training will be hard. Kenshin's voice was low, intimate in the evening stillness. I will push you past comfort, past what you believe are your limits. You will ache and bleed and curse my name. But if you submit willingly, if you trust me to know how much you can endure, then I will transform you into something magnificent. His hand came up slowly, giving Daichi time to pull away if he wished. But Daichi did not move, frozen in place as those calloused fingers touched his face with surprising gentleness. Kenshin's palm was warm against his cheek, rough and large and capable of such violence, yet holding him with exquisite care. You want more than fighting techniques. Kenshin's thumb traced across Daichi's cheekbone, his gaze intense and knowing. You want to be claimed, to belong to someone strong enough to master you completely. You have been empty and invisible for so long that you ache for someone to fill that void, to make you feel significant and wanted and seen. Is that not true? The words stripped Daichi bare, exposing desires he had barely admitted to himself. He could not speak, could only nod slightly, his breath coming faster as Kenshin's thumb moved to trace his lower lip. I see you. Kenshin's voice dropped lower, rough and promising. I have seen you from the first moment, even when you thought yourself invisible. I know the hunger in you because I recognize it. We are both searching for purpose, for connection, for something to fill the emptiness inside. Perhaps we can fill it for each other. Daichi's heart pounded so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. This was more than he had hoped for, more than he had imagined possible. Kenshin was offering not just training, but something deeper, something that terrified and exhilarated him simultaneously. I have never, Daichi started, then stopped, unsure how to articulate his inexperience. His face heated with embarrassment. I do not know how to, what to. I have never been with anyone. Kenshin's expression softened slightly, some of the intensity easing into something almost tender. I know. Your innocence is written in every movement, every expression. You have never been touched, never been desired, never been taught how your body can feel when someone knows how to use it properly. His hand slid from Daichi's face down to his throat, fingers resting lightly against his pulse point. You are trembling, afraid of me, or of what I make you feel. Both, Daichi managed, his voice barely audible. But I want this, want you. Whatever this is, whatever you would teach me, I want to learn it, even if I do not understand it yet. Good, Kenshin's smile was slight but genuine, warming his usually stern features. Honesty is essential. If we do this, if I take you as my student and you submit to my authority, then you must always tell me truth when something frightens you, when something hurts, when you want more or need less. Your honesty in exchange for my mastery, can you give me that? Yes, master. Daichi forced the words past the tightness in his throat. I will always tell you truth. I will trust you with everything. Then we begin tomorrow. Kenshin's hand dropped away, leaving Daichi feeling strangely bereft at the loss of contact. Before dawn, come to the small practice yard behind the retainer's quarters. We will train privately before the others wake. Your body needs to be shaped, tested, taught how to move with purpose rather than apology. He stepped back, putting proper distance between them again, but his eyes remained locked on Daichi's face. And Daichi, wear something you do not mind getting ruined. The first lesson is always the hardest, and you will likely end it covered in dirt and sweat. Daichi nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His body felt electrified, humming with anticipation and nerves and desire he could not fully name. Tomorrow everything would change. Kenshin picked up the sake bottle and cups, preparing to leave. Then he paused and looked back, his expression unreadable in the deepening twilight. You asked me to be rough with you, to push you hard so you could earn your place. Be very certain you mean that, Daichi. Because once we begin, I will hold nothing back. I will demand everything you have and more. If you are not ready for that intensity, tell me now before we cross this line. I am ready. The words came out strong, certain, despite the fear, tangling with excitement in Daichi's chest. I want everything you will give me, master. Please do not hold back. I need to know what it feels like to be pushed beyond myself, to become more than I am. I need you to be rough with me, if that is what it takes to transform me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning beyond just physical training. They both knew Daichi was asking for more than sword lessons, even if neither of them could yet articulate exactly what that more entailed. Kenshin's eyes darkened, his expression shifting into something predatory and hungry. Tomorrow then, before dawn, do not be late or I will come find you, and the punishment for making me wait will be memorable. He left without another word, melting into the shadows with that fluid grace, leaving Daichi alone in the garden with his heart racing and his body vibrating with anticipation. The night suddenly felt charged with possibility, the future transformed from empty repetition into something filled with promise and purpose. Daichi did not sleep that night. He lay on his mat staring at ceiling beams, replaying every word Kenshin had spoken, every touch, every look. His body felt too warm, too aware of itself in ways it never had before. When he closed his eyes, he saw Kenshin's face, felt phantom fingers against his cheek and throat, remembered the intensity in those dark eyes when the Ronin looked at him like he was something valuable rather than invisible. Tomorrow he would submit himself to Kenshin's authority completely, would let the Ronin push him, test him, shape him into something new. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. He did not know what he was truly agreeing to, what submitting to Kenshin would actually mean beyond training, but he wanted it with desperate intensity, wanted to belong to someone that strong, wanted to be seen and claimed and filled with purpose. The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Daichi gave up trying to sleep around the 4th hour, instead performing his ablutions and dressing in his oldest practice clothes, soft hakama and a plain kosode that he would not mourn if they were destroyed. His hands shook slightly as he tied the hakama, nerves making him clumsy. He slipped out of the servants' quarters while the sky was still dark, stars fading as dawn approached. The estate was silent, everyone still sleeping, only guards on the walls moving in their patrols. Daichi's footsteps were quiet on stone paths as he made his way to the small practice yard Kenshin had specified. It was a private space, secluded behind the retainer's building, surrounded by high walls and bamboo screening. rarely used because the main practice yard was larger and better equipped. The perfect place for private lessons, Daichi realized. No one would see them here. No one would interrupt or question why a servant was training with the legendary Ronin. Kenshin was already there, standing in the center of the yard with arms crossed, waiting. He wore simple hakama and had removed his outer robes, leaving only a thin undershirt that revealed the lean, powerful lines of his body. In the pre-dawn darkness, he looked even more imposing, a figure of shadow and barely contained strength. Daichi approached slowly, his heart pounding, and stopped a respectful distance away. He bowed deeply, formal and correct. "Good morning, Master. I am here as you commanded." Kenshin's eyes traveled over him, assessing with that penetrating gaze that made Daichi feel stripped bare. "You came early. Good. Eagerness is preferable to reluctance. Drop the formality, Daichi. When we are alone like this, we do not need rigid protocols. I am your master, and you are my student. That is sufficient." "Yes, Master." Daichi straightened from his bow, trying to control his breathing, trying not to show how nervous he felt under that scrutiny. "Nervous?" Kenshin observed, not a question, but a statement of fact. "That is natural for your first lesson, but you must learn to channel fear into focus rather than letting it paralyze you. Fear makes you hesitate, and hesitation in battle means death." He moved closer with that predatory grace, circling Daichi slowly like a wolf assessing prey. "I need to see how your body moves naturally before I can begin correcting bad habits. Show me a basic strike sequence, whatever forms your father taught you." Daichi's mouth went dry. He had not practiced seriously in years, and even when his father was alive, his training had been minimal. He was going to embarrass himself, going to prove how inadequate he was. But Kenshin was waiting, watching with patient intensity, and Daichi had no choice but to try. He assumed a basic stance, trying to remember what his father had drilled into him years ago. His hands formed the proper grip on an imaginary sword, though they felt clumsy and uncertain. Then he moved through a simple combination: strike from overhead, recover, diagonal cut, reverse sweep. His movements were stiff, unbalanced, lacking the fluid grace he had watched Kenshin demonstrate in the main practice yard. When he finished the sequence and returned to ready position, breathing too hard from nerves rather than exertion, he forced himself to meet Kenshin's eyes. The Ronin's expression was unreadable, giving nothing away. "Again," Kenshin commanded, "slower this time. I need to see exactly where you are making mistakes." Daichi repeated the sequence, moving with exaggerated slowness, feeling every flaw in his form, every moment where his balance was off or his positioning wrong. It was humiliating, being so exposed in his inadequacy. "Stop," Kenshin's voice cracked like a whip. "Your stance is too narrow. Your weight distribution is wrong. Your arms carry all the tension when it should be in your core. You move like someone apologizing for existing rather than claiming your space with authority." He stepped behind Daichi, so close that Daichi could feel the heat of his body. And then Kenshin's hands were on him, large palms pressing against Daichi's hips, repositioning them with firm authority. Wider stance. Root yourself to the earth. A tree with shallow roots falls in the first strong wind. His hands moved to Daichi's shoulders, pulling them back, opening Daichi's chest. "Stop curling in on yourself. You have spent years trying to be small and invisible. That ends now. Take up space. Claim your presence." The touch was electric, professional but intimate. Kenshin's calloused hands confident on Daichi's body, repositioning him with the sureness of someone who knew exactly how a warrior should stand. Daichi could barely breathe, overwhelmed by proximity and contact and the sheer authority in Kenshin's touch. "Better." Kenshin's voice was close to Daichi's ear, his breath warm against Daichi's neck. "Feel the difference. Your center of gravity is lower now, more stable. You could withstand force from any direction in this stance, whereas before, a child could have pushed you over." His hands lingered on Daichi's hips, not releasing immediately, and Daichi felt something shift in the air between them. The contact was no longer purely instructional. There was heat in it now, awareness, the acknowledgement of desire simmering beneath the surface of their formal teacher-student dynamic. Again, Kenshin's hands dropped away, leaving Daiichi's skin tingling where he had been touched, the sequence from this stance. Slowly, Daiichi moved through the forms again, trying to maintain the positioning Kenshin had imposed. It felt foreign, claiming space this way, standing with authority rather than apology. But Kenshin was right. The balance was better, the movements more grounded. Good. Kenshin circled to face him. Your body learns quickly when properly instructed. That is promising. But technical skill alone is insufficient. You must understand that fighting is not just about physical technique. It is about will, about the readiness to inflict violence and endure pain without hesitation. Most men fail, not because they lack skill, but because they lack the mental fortitude to truly commit to the fight. He stopped directly in front of Daiichi, so close they were nearly touching. Tell me, Daiichi, why do you want to learn this? Not the polite answer about being useful, but the truth. What is this really about for you? Daiichi's throat tightened. The question demanded honesty he had never voiced aloud. He thought about lying, offering something safer, but Kenshin's eyes saw through every pretense. The truth was the only option. I want to matter. The words came out rough, scraped from somewhere deep inside. I want to be strong enough that people notice me, that I am not invisible anymore. I want to know what it feels like to have purpose, to belong somewhere, to someone. I want to be shaped into something significant by someone I respect. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. I want to know what it feels like to be claimed by you, Master, to have your attention focused on me. Your hands on me, your expectations pushing me beyond what I thought I could endure. I want to earn my place at your side through suffering and effort. I want you to be rough with me, to test me, to break me down and remake me into something worthy of keeping. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Daiichi felt naked despite being fully clothed, his deepest desires laid bare for Kenshin's judgment. Kenshin's expression shifted, something predatory entering his eyes, hunger barely leashed. You want to be mine, not just my student, but my possession. You want me to own you, body and will, and find satisfaction in that ownership. Yes. Daiichi did not flinch from the directness. Yes, Master, I want to belong to you completely. Whatever that means, whatever that requires, I want it. Dangerous words. Kenshin's hand came up to grip Daiichi's jaw, not gently, but with enough force to make Daiichi gasp. You do not understand what you are offering. You are innocent, untouched, ignorant of how power dynamics work between men who desire each other. I could take advantage of that innocence, could twist your hunger for significance into something that serves only my needs. Then do it. Daiichi met Kenshin's eyes without wavering despite the grip on his jaw. Take advantage, use me, shape me however serves you best. I trust you to know my limits better than I know them myself. I am giving you authority over me freely, Master. Please do not reject this gift. Kenshin's eyes darkened, his breath coming faster. His thumb pressed against Daiichi's lower lip, rough and possessive. You have no idea what you do to me. Standing here offering yourself with such honest hunger, I should refuse, should send you away before this becomes something neither of us can walk back from. But you will not. Daiichi barely recognized his own voice, rough with need and certainty. Because you want this too. You want to claim me, own me. Fill the emptiness inside me with your purpose and your will. You are as lonely as I am, Master. You need someone to belong to you as much as I need to belong to someone. Truth cut both ways, it seemed. Kenshin's mask cracked, revealing the hunger beneath his controlled exterior. Yes, he admitted roughly. Yes, I want to claim you, want to mark you as mine, train you until your body responds to my voice before your mind can catch up. Shape you into a weapon that exists for my pleasure and purposes. I want to be the one who fills your emptiness, who makes you matter. His grip on Daiichi's jaw tightened almost painfully. But if we do this, if I accept you as truly mine rather than just a student, then there will be no half measures. You will submit to me completely. Your body in training and in pleasure both. Your obedience absolute. Your trust unwavering even when I push you past what you believe you can endure. Can you give me that, Daichi? All of yourself. No reservations, no safe boundaries beyond telling me when something is truly beyond your limits. Yes, Master. Daichi's voice was steady despite his racing heart. I give you all of myself. No reservations. I trust you to know my limits and push me to them. I want to be yours completely. Kenshin stared at him for a long moment, something fierce and possessive burning in those dark eyes. Then his hand released Daichi's jaw, sliding down to grip the back of his neck instead, holding him in place with authority that made Daichi's knees weak. Then we seal this bond properly, not with words alone, but with your body's surrender to mine. You will learn today what it means to belong to me, to submit completely, to discover pleasures you did not know existed, and you will do so willingly, eagerly, because serving me gives you the purpose you have been craving. His other hand gripped Daichi's hip, pulling him closer until their bodies pressed together, and Daichi could feel the hard evidence of Kenshin's desire through layers of fabric. The sensation sent shockwaves through him, equal parts terrifying and exhilarating. But first, Kenshin continued, his voice dropping to something rough and commanding, you will train until your body aches, until sweat soaks through your clothing, until you understand viscerally that I will push you beyond comfort. Physical training and pleasure are not separate lessons, Daichi. Both teach you to trust me with your limits, to surrender control, to find transcendence through submission. He released Daichi suddenly, stepping back and gesturing to the practice yard. 20 repetitions of the basic sequence. Full speed now, not the careful movements from before. I want to see you commit fully to each strike. No hesitation, no apology in your form. Daichi moved to the center of the yard, his body still vibrating from Kenshin's touch, his mind reeling from the implications of what they had just agreed to. But Kenshin was watching with expectant intensity, and Daichi forced himself to focus on the physical task. He moved through the sequence again and again, each repetition demanding more from his untrained muscles. By the 10th repetition, his arms were burning. By the 15th, sweat was dripping down his face and soaking into his clothing. By the 20th, his legs trembled with exhaustion, and his breath came in ragged gasps. Good. Kenshin's approval sent warmth through Daichi, despite his exhaustion. You did not quit, did not ask for mercy, pushed through discomfort to complete what I commanded. That is the foundation of everything we will build together. Your willingness to endure for me. He approached with water, holding the cup to Daichi's lips rather than handing it over, making Daichi drink from his hand. The gesture was intimate, caretaking, establishing the dynamic between them. Kenshin cared for him, but on Kenshin's terms, in Kenshin's way. Now we work on strength. Kenshin set the cup aside. Your body is too soft still, untrained for the rigors of combat. We will change that. Down on the ground, hands and knees. Hold yourself up while I add weight. Daichi lowered himself to the position, his arms already shaking from fatigue. Kenshin knelt behind him, placing one hand on Daichi's lower back, the touch burning through thin fabric. Hold steady. Do not let your form collapse. Kenshin's other hand pressed down on Daichi's shoulder, adding pressure, testing his strength. Daichi's arms trembled violently, struggling to support even his own weight, plus the additional pressure from Kenshin's hand. Breathe. Kenshin's voice was closer now, his breath warm against Daichi's ear. Do not fight the strain. Accept it, work through it. Understand that pain is temporary, but the strength you build is permanent. Daichi's arms gave out, sending him collapsing to the ground with a frustrated sound. Kenshin's hands left him immediately, and Daichi felt the loss like a physical ache. Again, up, same position. They repeated the exercise over and over, each time Daichi lasting longer before collapse, each time Kenshin's hands on his body sending complicated heat through his exhaustion. This was torture and pleasure intertwined, pushing his body past its limits while making him acutely aware of Kenshin's proximity, his touch, his approval when Daichi succeeded. By the time dawn fully broke, Daichi was shaking with exhaustion, his clothing soaked with sweat, his muscles screaming. He had never worked this hard, never pushed himself this far, and the sense of accomplishment was intoxicating. He had endured. He had not quit despite wanting to. He had submitted to Kenshin's demands completely. Enough. Kenshin pulled him to his feet with hands under his arms, supporting him when his legs threatened to give out. You did well for your first real training. Your body will hate you tomorrow, but you proved you have the will to endure. That is more important than current strength. He guided Daichi toward the edge of the yard where a water barrel stood. Strip. You cannot return to your quarters looking like this. People will ask questions we do not wish to answer yet. Daichi's hands went to his clothing automatically, then hesitated. He had never been naked in front of another person, not since childhood. The thought of exposing himself to Kenshin's gaze sent embarrassment and something darker through him. Do not be shy now. Kenshin's tone was amused but firm. I am going to see and touch every part of you eventually. Might as well start becoming comfortable with your body being mine to observe. The words sent heat flooding through Daichi despite his exhaustion. He forced his trembling fingers to untie his hakama. Let the fabric fall to the ground. His kosode followed until he stood naked in the early morning light, vulnerable and exposed under Kenshin's assessing gaze. Kenshin did not touch him yet, just looked, his eyes traveling slowly over Daichi's body with the same intensity he had used to assess his fighting form. Daichi felt that gaze like a physical touch, warming his skin, making him aware of every imperfection. You are beautiful. Kenshin's voice was rough with appreciation. Untouched, untrained, but the raw material is excellent. I will enjoy shaping you, marking you, teaching your body to respond to mine. He moved closer, one hand coming up to trace the line of Daichi's collarbone. Your skin bruises easily, I can see. The training will mark you, and you will wear those marks with pride, knowing each one was earned through your submission to my demands. His hand continued down, trailing across Daichi's chest, and Daichi's breath caught at the sensation. Kenshin's touch was confident, possessive, claiming. He traced over ribs and across the plane of Daichi's stomach, watching Daichi's face the entire time, gauging his reactions. Sensitive. Kenshin observed when Daichi gasped at a particular touch. Your body is eager despite your inexperience. That is good. Pleasure should come easily between us. His hand moved lower still, and Daichi made an involuntary sound, part fear and part need, as Kenshin's fingers wrapped around his hardness. The sensation was overwhelming, more intense than anything Daichi had experienced when touching himself alone in the dark. Kenshin's hand was rough, calloused, confident, moving with purpose and skill. So responsive. Kenshin's voice dropped lower, intimate and dark. You have never been touched like this before, have you? Never felt another person's hand on you, never experienced what your body can feel when someone knows how to use it properly. No, Daichi barely managed the word, his mind fragmenting under the assault of sensation. Never, master. Only you, only ever you. The possessive answer clearly pleased Kenshin, because his grip tightened slightly, his movement becoming more deliberate. Good. You belong to me now, Daichi. This body, these reactions, this pleasure, all mine. No one else will ever touch you like this. No one else will ever know how you respond, how you sound, how you look when you surrender completely. Daichi could not form words anymore, could only cling to Kenshin's shoulders, while his body responded with embarrassing eagerness to this first real touch. He was shaking again, but not from exhaustion now, from need, from overwhelming sensation, from the sheer intensity of being handled with such confident authority by someone who clearly knew exactly what he was doing. Let go, Kenshin commanded. Give me your first release by another's hand. Let me see what you look like when pleasure takes you apart. The permission, combined with the skilled movement of Kenshin's hand, shattered what little control Daichi had. Pleasure crashed through him in waves that left him gasping, his body convulsing, his vision going white. He heard himself cry out, Kenshin's name falling from his lips like a prayer, and through the overwhelming sensation, he felt Kenshin's other arm come around him, supporting him, holding him through the intensity. When awareness returned, Daichi found himself collapsed against Kenshin's chest, the Ronin's strength the only thing keeping him upright. His body felt boneless, floating, more satisfied than he had ever felt in his life. Beautiful. Kenshin's voice was warm with approval. You surrender so sweetly, Daichi, giving yourself over to pleasure without shame or resistance. That is exactly what I want from you. Total honesty in your responses, complete trust that I will not harm you even when I push you to your limits. He guided Daichi to the water barrel, using a cloth to clean him with the same care he had shown in everything else. The tenderness after the intensity made Daichi's throat tight with emotion he could not name. Kenshin had been demanding, rough when needed, but now he was gentle, taking care of Daichi's body with focused attention. Get dressed. Kenshin handed him clean clothing he had brought, anticipating this need. You will return to your duties now. Act normally. Give no indication that anything has changed. But tonight, after the household sleeps, come to my chamber. We will continue your education in privacy. The promise in those words sent anticipation racing through Daichi. He dressed quickly, his fingers clumsy with exhaustion and nervousness, and residual pleasure. When he was presentable again, he turned to find Kenshin watching him with possessive satisfaction. Thank you, Master. Daichi bowed formally. For teaching me, for seeing me, for giving me purpose. You are mine now. Kenshin's response was simple, absolute. That gives you all the purpose you need. Go now. I will see you tonight. Daichi left the practice yard on unsteady legs, his body aching, his mind reeling, his heart fuller than it had ever been. He belonged to someone. He mattered to someone. He had been seen and claimed and given a purpose beyond invisibility. Everything had changed in the span of one morning, and Daichi felt like he was walking through a dream. The day passed in a blur. Daichi moved through his duties mechanically, his mind elsewhere, replaying every moment of the morning's training. The way Kenshin's hands had felt on his body, the roughness in his voice when he commanded and praised, the overwhelming pleasure of that first touch, the promise of more tonight. He caught himself smiling while copying documents, distracted in a way that would have been unthinkable before. One of the senior scribes noticed and commented that Daichi seemed particularly cheerful today. Daichi just ducked his head and made some excuse about the pleasant weather, but inside he was burning with secrets he could not share. He belonged to Kenshin now. That knowledge transformed everything, made even tedious tasks feel bearable because they were just time to pass until he could return to his master's side. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sunset came, then evening meal, then the gradual quieting of the estate as people retired. Daichi waited in the servants' quarters, listening to the sounds of others settling into sleep, counting his heartbeats until enough time had passed that he could slip away without drawing attention. When he finally made his way through darkened corridors to the retainer's quarters where Kenshin had been given a private chamber, his hands were shaking with anticipation and nervousness in equal measure. He had no clear idea what would happen tonight, only that Kenshin had promised to continue his education, and that promise held infinite possibilities. He knocked softly on the wooden frame of Kenshin's door, barely breathing while he waited for response. Enter. Kenshin's voice came from within, and Daichi slid the door open carefully, stepping inside and closing it behind him. The chamber was simple but comfortable, larger than what servants received, but not ostentatious. A single lamp burned low, casting warm light across the space. Kenshin sat at a low table, still dressed but relaxed, a cup of sake before him. When Daichi entered, those dark eyes fixed on him with immediate focus. You came. Not a question, but there was satisfaction in Kenshin's tone. Good. Loyalty and obedience please me. Come here. Daichi crossed to where Kenshin sat, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might be visible through his clothing. When he reached the table, he knelt formally, head bowed, waiting for instruction. Look at me, Kenshin commanded. When we are alone like this, I want to see your eyes, see your reactions, know what you are thinking and feeling. Do not hide from me, Daichi. Daichi raised his head, meeting Kenshin's gaze directly. The intensity there made his breath catch, hunger barely leashed, desire mixed with something that might have been tenderness. How do you feel? Kenshin asked. Your body must ache from this morning's training. Are you too exhausted for more lessons tonight, or do you still hunger for what I can teach you? I ache, Daichi admitted honestly. My muscles protest every movement. But I am not too exhausted, Master. I want to learn everything you will teach me. My body's discomfort is irrelevant compared to my need to understand what it means to belong to you completely. Kenshin's expression shifted, heat flaring in his eyes. Such perfect answers you give me. Honesty about your limitations combined with eagerness to push through them. Come closer, Daichi. Kneel between my knees. I want to touch you properly, without the constraints of a public practice yard. Daichi moved to obey, positioning himself in the intimate space Kenshin's spread legs created. This close, he could smell cedar and sake and clean masculine sweat, could see the way Kenshin's breathing had quickened slightly, could feel the heat radiating between them. Kenshin's hand came up to cup Daichi's face, thumb tracing his cheekbone with surprising gentleness. You are so young, so innocent. I should feel guilty for corrupting you this way, for taking your inexperience and shaping it to serve my desires. But I cannot summon regret when you offer yourself so sweetly. Please do not regret it. Daichi turned his face into Kenshin's palm, the gesture instinctive. I want to be corrupted by you. Want to learn everything you will teach me. This is not you taking advantage, Master. This is me begging you to use me, to make me yours in every possible way. Kenshin made a rough sound, almost a groan. You destroy my restraint with words like that. I am trying to go slowly, to not overwhelm you with too much too soon, but you make it very difficult to maintain control. Then do not maintain control. Daichi's courage surprised himself, but the words felt right. You told me this morning that I must trust you to know my limits. I do trust you, Master. I trust you to take what you need from me, to push me as hard as you wish, to teach my body to respond to yours. Please stop holding back. I want everything. Kenshin stared at him for a long moment, something fierce and possessive burning in his gaze. Then his hand tightened on Daichi's face, and he leaned forward, closing the distance between them. The kiss was nothing like Daichi had imagined a first kiss would be. It was not gentle or tentative. It was consuming, claiming. Kenshin's mouth hot and demanding against his. Daichi made a startled sound against Kenshin's lips, then surrendered completely, opening to the invasion of Kenshin's tongue, letting himself be taken with an intensity that left him dizzy. Kenshin kissed like he fought, with focused precision and overwhelming force, learning the shape of Daichi's mouth while teaching him how to respond properly. One hand remained on Daichi's face, holding him in place, while the other gripped the back of his neck, controlling the angle and depth of the kiss with absolute authority. When Kenshin finally pulled back, Daichi was gasping, his lips swollen and tingling, his mind fractured by sensation. He had been kissed, claimed, marked by Kenshin's mouth in a way that felt permanent and significant. Your first kiss. Kenshin's voice was rough with satisfaction. And it was mine. Everything about you will be mine, Daichi. Every first experience, every moment of pleasure, every sound of need. Mine to give, mine to control, mine to treasure. Yes, Master. Daichi barely managed the words. All yours. Everything. Please. Please what? Kenshin's thumb traced Daichi's swollen lower lip. Tell me what you want. I need to hear you ask for it. Daichi's face heated with embarrassment, but honesty was required between them. I want you to touch me again. Want to feel your hands on my body without clothing between us. Want you to teach me how to touch you in return. He struggled to find words for desires he barely understood. I want to know what it feels like to be completely connected to you, to have you inside me in every way possible. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Kenshin's eyes darkened with hunger, his breath coming faster. You want me to claim you fully, to take your innocence and replace it with knowledge of pleasure beyond anything you have imagined, to make you mine in the most intimate way possible. Yes. Daichi held Kenshin's gaze without flinching. Yes, master. I want all of that. Tonight, if you will have me, I do not want to wait any longer to belong to you completely. Kenshin made that rough sound again, restraint visibly fraying. You test my control, offering yourself with such honest eagerness. Most people require seduction, careful coaxing, but you simply kneel before me and beg to be claimed. It is intoxicating. He stood abruptly, pulling Daichi up with him. If we do this tonight, if I take you fully, there will be some pain at first. Your body is untrained for such use, and even with preparation, the first time is rarely comfortable. But I will be as careful as I can while still teaching you that pleasure and pain often intermingle, that surrendering to both is what creates transcendence. Can you accept that? I trust you, Daichi repeated, and it was true. He trusted Kenshin with his body, his pleasure, his limits. If there was pain, it would be purposeful, teaching him something important. I want to learn everything, master. Even the things that hurt. Then come to the sleeping mat. Kenshin guided him toward the futon spread in the corner of the chamber. We will take our time with this. Your body needs to be prepared properly, taught how to accept me without damage. And I will enjoy every moment of teaching you how pleasure builds, how anticipation enhances sensation, how surrender leads to ecstasy. Kenshin's hands went to Daichi's clothing, untying knots with practiced efficiency, until Daichi stood naked in the lamplight once again. This time the exposure felt different, charged with promise rather than embarrassment. Kenshin's gaze traveled over his body with open appreciation, possessive and hungry. Lie down, on your back, arms above your head. Daichi obeyed, settling onto the soft futon, stretching his arms overhead as commanded. The position made him feel vulnerable, exposed, every part of his body on display for Kenshin's observation. His heart raced with anticipation and nervousness in equal measure. Kenshin stood over him for a moment, just looking, his expression fierce with possession. Then he began removing his own clothing, and Daichi's breath caught at the revelation of the body beneath. Kenshin was magnificent, lean muscle defined by years of training, scars from old battles marking his skin like a map of violence survived. His body was a weapon, honed and deadly, yet moved with grace that suggested art as much as warfare. And lower, his desire was evident, hard and substantial, and Daichi felt a flutter of nervousness at the reality of what was coming. Kenshin knelt beside the futon, his hands settling on Daichi's ankles. I am going to touch every part of you, learn what makes you gasp, what makes you tremble, what makes you beg. Your body will have no secrets from me by the time I am finished. And you will learn that pleasure is not shameful, that your responses please me, that crying out and trembling and surrendering completely is exactly what I want from you. His hands moved up Daichi's legs slowly, calloused palms rough against sensitive skin. Daichi's breathing quickened as those hands traveled higher, touching, exploring, awakening nerves he hadn't known existed. When Kenshin's fingers traced the inside of his thigh, Daichi's hips lifted involuntarily, seeking more contact. Eager, Kenshin's voice was approving, but you will learn patience as well. Good things come to those who can wait, who can endure anticipation until it becomes almost unbearable. That makes the eventual release so much more intense. He continued his torturous exploration, hands mapping Daichi's body with focused attention, across stomach and ribs, up to chest, fingers finding sensitive points that made Daichi gasp and arch. Kenshin's touch was confident, possessive, claiming every inch of skin as his territory. When Kenshin's mouth followed where his hands had been, Daichi thought he might come apart from sensation alone. The heat of Kenshin's lips against his chest, the gentle scrape of teeth, the soothing sweep of tongue. It was overwhelming and perfect, and more than Daichi had imagined possible. So responsive. Kenshin murmured against Daichi's skin. Every touch makes you tremble. Every kiss makes you gasp. You were made for this, Daichi. Made to be touched and pleasured and claimed. Your body knows it, even if your mind has not caught up yet. His hand wrapped around Daichi's hardness again, and Daichi cried out at the sensation, his body so sensitized that even that familiar touch felt new and overwhelming. Kenshin worked him with skilled precision, building pleasure with deliberate care, watching Daichi's face the entire time. "Do not hold back," Kenshin commanded. "Let me hear you. Let me see exactly what I do to you, Master." Daichi gasped, unable to form more coherent words. "Please, it is too much. I cannot. You can." Kenshin's voice was firm. "You will. Your body can endure far more pleasure than you believe possible. Trust me to know your limits better than you know them yourself." He continued his ministrations, bringing Daichi to the edge of release and then stopping, letting the sensation ebb slightly before building it again. The torturous cycle repeated until Daichi was writhing on the futon, pleading incoherently. His body wound so tight he thought he might shatter. "Good." Kenshin's approval washed over him like warmth. "Now you understand what it means to be at my mercy, to have your pleasure controlled by my will rather than your own. This is submission, Daichi, surrendering even your body's responses to my authority." He reached for a small jar on the nearby table, and Daichi watched through pleasure-hazed eyes as Kenshin coated his fingers with oil. His mind struggled to understand the significance. Then comprehension dawned when Kenshin's hand moved lower, between his legs, touching him in places no one had ever touched before. "Breathe." Kenshin's voice was calm, reassuring. "Your body will resist at first because it is unfamiliar. But if you relax, if you trust me, it will begin to feel good. I promise you that." The first breach was strange, uncomfortable, foreign. Daichi tensed automatically, and Kenshin stopped immediately, his other hand stroking soothing patterns on Daichi's hip. "Breathe through it. Do not fight. Let your body accept this. I will go slowly. Will prepare you properly. Trust me." Daichi forced himself to relax, to breathe, to surrender control to Kenshin's skilled hands. Gradually, the strangeness transformed into something else. Not quite pleasure yet, but not entirely uncomfortable either. Kenshin worked patiently, carefully, adding more preparation with focused attention until Daichi's body began to respond differently. "There." Kenshin's voice held satisfaction when Daichi gasped at a particular sensation. "That is what I was searching for. The place inside you that transforms discomfort into pleasure. Now you begin to understand what your body is capable of feeling." He was right. The sensation shifted, becoming something overwhelming and perfect, making Daichi cry out and arch off the futon. His mind could not process the intensity, could only surrender to it completely. Beautiful. Kenshin continued his careful preparation while Daichi fell apart beneath his hands. "So perfect when you let go of control. This is what I want from you always. Complete surrender, total trust, absolute honesty in your responses." When Kenshin finally positioned himself, when Daichi felt the pressure of something much larger than fingers, his nervousness returned in full force. This was it, the moment of complete claiming, the permanent transformation from innocent to owned. "Look at me," Kenshin commanded, and Daichi forced his eyes open, meeting that intense dark gaze. "I am going to claim you now, Daichi. You will belong to me in every possible way. This will hurt at first despite the preparation, but I need you to breathe through it, to trust that the pain will pass and pleasure will follow. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, Master." Daichi forced the words out despite his fear. "I trust you. Please claim me. Make me yours completely." Kenshin began to push forward, and Daichi gasped at the sensation, his body instinctively trying to resist despite the preparation. The stretch was intense, bordering on painful, making his breath come in short gasps. "Breathe." Kenshin held himself still, not advancing further, letting Daichi adjust. Just breathe through it. The worst is passing. Soon, it will only feel good. He was partially right. The sharp pain dulled to an ache, then to a strange fullness that was not entirely unpleasant. When Kenshin advanced again, moving deeper, Daichi made a sound that was half pain and half something else. There, Kenshin's voice was strained with the effort of going slowly. All of me. You took all of me, Daichi. So perfect. So tight. So absolutely mine. The words sent heat through Daichi despite the discomfort. He had done it. Had accepted all of Kenshin. Had surrendered his body completely to his master's claim, the sense of accomplishment mixed with the strange sensations, creating something overwhelming and profound. How does it feel? Kenshin asked, his hands stroking soothing patterns on Daichi's hips. Tell me honestly. Too much. Should I withdraw and let you adjust more? No. Daichi surprised himself with the vehemence of his response. Do not withdraw. It aches, but not unbearably. I want to feel all of you. Want to know what it is like when you move. Please, master, use me. Show me what this is supposed to feel like. Kenshin made that rough sound again, clearly affected by Daichi's words. You undo me with your eagerness. Very well, I will move, but slowly at first. If it becomes too much, tell me immediately. He withdrew slightly and pushed back in. The movement creating sensations Daichi had no framework for processing. It was strange and uncomfortable, and somehow good all at once, overwhelming in ways that made coherent thought impossible. Kenshin established a careful rhythm, watching Daichi's face constantly for signs of true distress. And gradually, incrementally, the discomfort began transforming into something else. Into pleasure that built with each controlled thrust, into sensation that made Daichi gasp and arch, seeking more, despite not fully understanding what his body wanted. There. Kenshin's voice was rough with satisfaction when Daichi cried out sharply, I found it again, the place inside you that makes everything feel perfect. Now you understand what I meant about pleasure and pain intermingling, about surrender leading to transcendence. He was right. The sensation was overwhelming, intense beyond anything Daichi had experienced, making his body respond in ways he could not control. He heard himself making sounds he did not recognize, pleading and gasping and calling Kenshin's name like a prayer. That is it. Kenshin encouraged, his rhythm becoming more purposeful. Let me hear you. Let me see what I do to you. You are magnificent like this, Daichi. Completely open, completely mine. Surrendering to pleasure without shame or restraint. His hand wrapped around Daichi's neglected arousal, working him in time with his thrusts, and the dual sensation was too much. Pleasure built to impossible heights, wound tighter and tighter until Daichi thought he might die from the intensity. Come for me, Kenshin commanded. Let me feel you surrender completely. Give me everything, Daichi. The permission shattered what little control Daichi had left. Pleasure crashed through him in waves that seemed endless, his body convulsing, his voice crying out Kenshin's name over and over while his mind fractured into pure sensation. Through his own pleasure, he felt Kenshin's rhythm falter, heard his master's rough groan as he found his own release, felt the heat of it inside him, marking him from within. The sensation was profound, intimate beyond anything physical, the ultimate claiming. When awareness slowly returned, Daichi found himself cradled against Kenshin's chest, the Ronin's strong arms holding him through the aftershocks. His body ached in new ways, stretched and used and thoroughly claimed. But beneath the physical sensations was something deeper. Satisfaction. Completion. The sense of finally belonging somewhere. To someone. You did so well. Kenshin's voice was soft, tender in a way Daichi had not heard before. Took everything I gave you, surrendered so beautifully, trusted me with your innocence and your body and your pleasure. I am honored by your gift, Daichi. You are precious to me. The words made Daichi's throat tight with emotion. He had never been precious to anyone, had spent his entire life being invisible, insignificant, easily overlooked. But Kenshin saw him, valued him, treasured his submission. Thank you, Master, Daichi managed to say despite his exhaustion, for claiming me, for making me yours, for giving me purpose and significance. I have never felt so complete." Kenshin pressed a kiss to his hair, the gesture surprisingly gentle. "This is only the beginning. We have just started your transformation. By the time I am finished with you, you will be formidable in combat and devoted in service. You will be a weapon I have honed and a treasure I protect, mine in every way that matters." Daichi drifted toward sleep, wrapped in Kenshin's arms, his body thoroughly used, his heart fuller than it had ever been. He belonged, he mattered, he had been seen and claimed and given a place in the world that felt right in a way nothing else ever had. The following weeks passed in a blur of training and secret nights. Daichi's days were filled with his regular duties, moving through the estate, performing his assigned tasks, while his body ached pleasantly from Kenshin's demanding physical training. His nights belonged entirely to his master, spent in Kenshin's chamber, learning lessons both martial and intimate. His body transformed under Kenshin's attention. Muscles developed where there had been only softness before. His movements became more fluid, more confident, as Kenshin drilled techniques into him with patient repetition. He learned to strike with authority, to move with purpose, to claim space rather than apologizing for occupying it. The transformation was not just physical. Something fundamental shifted inside Daichi during those weeks. The walls he had built around his heart, the careful invisibility he had maintained for years, all of it crumbled under Kenshin's steady attention. He learned to want things openly, to ask for what he needed, to trust that his desires would not be punished or dismissed. Kenshin was an exacting teacher, but a generous one. He pushed Daichi hard, demanding more than Daichi thought he could give, but always caught him when he faltered. The Ronin's praise was rare but genuine, and Daichi found himself working desperately to earn those moments of approval, to see satisfaction in Kenshin's dark eyes when he succeeded. Their physical relationship deepened as well. Kenshin taught Daichi how bodies could connect in countless ways, how pleasure could be given and received, how trust enabled experiences that would be impossible without it. Daichi learned to read his master's responses, learned what touches pleased him, learned how to serve Kenshin's needs while finding satisfaction in that service. But they had to remain careful. Their relationship existed in a precarious space, technically acceptable as master and devoted student, but walking a fine line that could become scandalous if examined too closely. They maintained strict discretion during daylight hours, no lingering looks, no inappropriate contact, nothing that would draw attention or invite speculation. It was harder than Daichi had expected, seeing Kenshin in the corridors or at meals and having to pretend he was just another servant, while memories of the previous night burned in his mind. But Kenshin had been clear that discretion protected them both, and Daichi would do anything to preserve what they had built. Summer deepened, the season advancing toward its eventual conclusion, and with it came the creeping awareness that Kenshin's agreement with Lord Takeda was temporary. He had been hired for specific training purposes, and eventually that purpose would be fulfilled, and he would move on. The thought filled Daichi with dread he tried desperately to ignore. One evening, about 6 weeks after their arrangement had begun, Daichi found the courage to voice the fear that had been growing inside him. They were lying together in Kenshin's chamber, the lamp burning low, their bodies cooling after intimacy. Daichi rested his head on Kenshin's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, trying to memorize the feeling of being held by someone who mattered. "Master." Daichi spoke quietly into the comfortable silence. "Your agreement with Lord Takeda, how much longer does it last?" He felt Kenshin's body tense slightly beneath him. Knew the Ronin had been expecting this question eventually. "Another month, perhaps 6 weeks at most. Lord Takeda's samurai have learned what I came to teach them. Soon my usefulness here will be exhausted." Daichi's chest tightened with anxiety. "And then you will leave." It was not a question, and Kenshin did not pretend otherwise. "Yes, I am Ronin, masterless. I cannot stay anywhere permanently. Selling my services as I move from place to place is how I survive." The words landed like stones in Daichi's stomach. He had known this intellectually, had understood from the beginning that Kenshin's presence was temporary, but understanding and accepting were different things. "Take me with you." The plea escaped before Daichi could stop it. "When you leave, take me with you. I can serve you, carry your things, tend your needs. I do not care where we go or how hard the journey is. I cannot go back to being invisible after knowing what it feels like to belong to you." Kenshin was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking through Daichi's hair with gentle repetition. "That would be complicated. You are not free to simply leave. You serve this household. Walking away would be abandoning your obligations. I will find a way." Daichi lifted his head to meet Kenshin's eyes. "I will speak to the steward, request release from service. My contract is not binding in the way a samurai's oath is. They might grant my request if I present it properly." "And if they refuse?" Kenshin asked quietly. "What then? Will you dishonor yourself by abandoning your post regardless?" The question forced Daichi to confront his own desperation. He wanted to say yes, that he would follow Kenshin regardless of honor or obligation, but Kenshin had taught him better than that. Honor mattered, duty mattered. Becoming someone worthy of respect meant upholding those values even when they were inconvenient. "No," Daichi admitted. "If they refuse my release, I will not abandon my obligations. But Master, please, help me find a way. I cannot imagine returning to my old life, being invisible again, not mattering to anyone. You have shown me what it feels like to have purpose. Do not take that away from me." Kenshin's arms tightened around him, pulling him closer. "I do not wish to leave you behind either, Daichi. These weeks with you have given me something I did not know I was missing. Purpose beyond just selling my sword. Someone to care for beyond myself. You have become precious to me, in ways I did not anticipate." "Then there must be a solution," Daichi insisted. "Some way to maintain what we have built together." Kenshin was silent again, clearly thinking through possibilities. Finally he said, "There may be a way, but it requires your commitment to becoming more than you are now. Your training has progressed well, but you are not yet skilled enough to serve as a proper retainer. If I could present you to Lord Takeda as someone I have personally trained and can vouch for, if your abilities were sufficient to merit a formal position as a samurai rather than a servant, then you could potentially request release from your current obligations to enter formal service with me." Daichi's breath caught. "You would do that? Take me on as your formal retainer, if you prove yourself worthy of it." Kenshin's tone became more businesslike. "The training would intensify significantly. You would need to demonstrate competence with multiple weapons, understand strategy and tactics, embody the discipline expected of a warrior. It would be grueling, Daichi, far harder than what we have done so far. And there is no guarantee of success, but if you are willing to commit completely, I am willing to try." Hope bloomed bright and fierce in Daichi's chest. "Yes, absolutely yes. Whatever I need to do, whatever training you demand, I will endure it. Please give me this chance, Master. Let me prove I can be worthy of standing beside you." Kenshin studied his face in the lamplight, and whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. "Then we begin tomorrow. Your formal training as my potential retainer. Expect no mercy, Daichi. I will push you harder than I have pushed you before. You will question whether you can endure, whether the goal is worth the suffering. But if you persevere, if you prove yourself through adversity, then I will formally request your release from servant status and take you into my service." Daichi surged up to kiss Kenshin with desperate gratitude. Thank you, Master. I will not disappoint you. I will work harder than anyone else, will endure anything you demand. I swear it. I know you will." Kenshin returned the kiss with equal intensity. "You have never disappointed me yet, Daichi. You are strong in ways you do not fully recognize. Now we will refine that strength until it is undeniable." The training that followed was indeed brutal. Kenshin drove Daichi relentlessly, drilling techniques until his arms shook with exhaustion, correcting his form with exacting precision, expecting perfection in execution. The private morning sessions expanded to fill every available hour Daichi could steal from his duties. He practiced sword forms until his hands bled through the wrappings. He sparred with Kenshin until his body was covered in bruises. He studied strategy and tactics until his head ached from concentration. Several times he reached breaking points where he thought he could not continue, where his body simply refused to obey commands anymore. Each time, Kenshin was there, sometimes pushing him through with harsh commands, sometimes allowing him to rest while explaining why the training mattered, sometimes simply holding him and reminding him why he was enduring this suffering. "You are becoming formidable," Kenshin told him one morning after a particularly grueling session. "Your progress in 8 weeks has been remarkable. Most students take years to achieve what you have learned in months. Your dedication drives you past normal limits." "It is not just dedication," Daichi said honestly. "It is necessity. The alternative is losing you, and that is unthinkable. I would endure any suffering to prevent that." Kenshin's expression softened. "You are devoted. That devotion is precious to me, Daichi. Never doubt that." As the deadline approached, as Kenshin's agreement with Lord Takeda drew toward its conclusion, Daichi worked with desperate intensity. His body had transformed significantly, lean muscle now visible where softness had been before. His movements carried confidence born from hours of drilling proper form. He was not yet a master, not even close, but he was recognizably competent in ways that might justify Kenshin's faith in him. Finally, 2 days before Kenshin's scheduled departure, the Ronin requested a private audience with Lord Takeda. Daichi was not present for the conversation, but Kenshin recounted it afterward. "I told him that during my time here, I had identified a servant with exceptional potential, that I had been training you privately and believed you capable of serving as a proper retainer rather than remaining in your current position. I requested permission to take you into my formal service when I depart." Daichi's heart pounded. What did he say? He was surprised, questioned whether a servant truly had the discipline for such a role. "So I offered a demonstration. Tomorrow, in the main practice yard, you will spar publicly against one of Lord Takeda's retainers. If you acquit yourself well, if you demonstrate the skills I have taught you, then Lord Takeda will grant your release and allow you to enter my service. If you fail, you remain here and I depart alone." The weight of that statement crushed down on Daichi. Everything depended on his performance tomorrow. His entire future, his chance to stay with Kenshin, balanced on whether he could execute what had been drilled into him under the scrutiny of an audience. "I will not fail," Daichi said with more confidence than he felt. "I cannot fail. Too much depends on it. You will succeed." Kenshin's voice was certain. "I have trained you for exactly this. Trust what I have taught you. Trust your body to remember the forms even when your mind is paralyzed with nervousness. You are ready, Daichi. Tomorrow you will prove it." That night, Daichi could not sleep despite exhaustion. He lay in Kenshin's arms, trying to memorize every sensation in case this was their last night together. Kenshin seemed to understand his anxiety because he held Daichi closer, murmured reassurances, made love to him with excruciating tenderness that brought tears to Daichi's eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Kenshin said afterward, stroking Daichi's hair while they lay tangled together, "know that you have already succeeded in the ways that matter most. You transformed yourself from someone invisible into someone formidable. You learned to want things and fight for them. You discovered your own strength and worth. Regardless of how the public demonstration goes, you are no longer the lost servant who watched training from shadows. You are a warrior, Daichi. Never forget that." The words helped, but Daichi's anxiety remained. He had worked so hard, endured so much. The thought of it all being for nothing, of Kenshin leaving without him, was unbearable. Morning came too quickly. Daichi rose before dawn to perform his ablutions with ritual care, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He dressed in clean hakama and kasode, plain but appropriate for what was to come. His hands shook slightly as he tied the fabric, nerves making him clumsy. Kenshin found him in the practice yard, looking calm and assured. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," Daichi admitted. "What if I freeze? What if I forget everything you taught me?" What if I disappoint you in front of everyone? Then you will have learned a valuable lesson about managing performance anxiety. Kenshin's tone was matter-of-fact rather than sympathetic. But I do not believe that will happen. You are nervous, yes, but you are also determined. Your desire to succeed will override your fear when the moment comes. Trust yourself, Daichi. I trust you. The words settled something inside Daichi. Kenshin trusted him. That mattered more than his own self-doubt. The demonstration was scheduled for mid-morning, giving Lord Takeda time to assemble his household to observe. By the time Daichi entered the main practice yard, dozens of samurai, retainers, and senior servants had gathered to watch. The attention made his skin prickle with discomfort, reminded him viscerally of years spent invisible while trying desperately to be seen. Lord Takeda sat in a place of honor, his expression neutral but assessing. Beside him, Kenshin stood with arms crossed, his face betraying no emotion. Daichi tried to find confidence in Kenshin's steady presence, tried to remember that his master believed in him. His opponent was introduced as Goro, one of Lord Takeda's veteran samurai. The man was older than Daichi by at least a decade, experienced and confident. He looked at Daichi with barely concealed skepticism, clearly doubting that a servant could pose any real challenge. That skepticism stung, but it also sparked something competitive inside Daichi. He would prove them all wrong, would show them that Kenshin's faith was justified. They bowed formally and assumed ready positions. Daichi forced himself to breathe, to let his body settle into the stance Kenshin had drilled into him thousands of times. Felt his muscles remember the positioning, the balance, the readiness. The signal came, and Goro advanced immediately, testing Daichi with a straightforward strike. Daichi parried automatically, his body responding before his mind could overthink. And suddenly he was moving, fighting, executing the techniques Kenshin had burned into his muscle memory through endless repetition. Goro was skilled, but Daichi had been trained by someone better. He could read the veteran samurai's intentions, could see the telegraphs in his positioning, could respond with combinations Kenshin had taught him. They exchanged strikes, testing each other, and Daichi felt his nervousness transforming into focus. This was what he had trained for. This was what Kenshin had prepared him to do. He began pressing his advantage, using speed and precision to compensate for Goro's greater experience. Drew on everything Kenshin had taught him about timing and distance and reading an opponent. And when he saw the opening, when Goro's guard dropped for just a moment, Daichi committed completely to a combination that ended with his practice blade at Goro's throat. The yard fell silent. Daichi stepped back immediately, bowing to his opponent with proper respect. But inside he was screaming with relief and triumph. He had done it, had proven himself publicly, had demonstrated that Kenshin's training was justified. Lord Takeda stood, his expression thoughtful. You have taught him well, Kenshin. I see your techniques in his movements, your discipline in his form. This is indeed remarkable progress for someone who began as a servant. He approached Daichi directly, studying him with new interest. You wish to enter formal service with the Ronin, to leave the security of this household and wander with a masterless warrior. Yes, my lord. Daichi bowed deeply. Master Kenshin has given me purpose and training. I wish to serve him formally, to continue learning under his guidance. I request permission to be released from my current obligations. Lord Takeda was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Your demonstration was impressive. You have proven yourself worthy of the opportunity. I grant your release from servant status. You may enter formal service with Kenshin, with my blessing. Relief flooded through Daichi so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. He bowed again, deeper this time, gratitude overwhelming him. Thank you, my lord. I am honored by your generosity. Serve with honor, Lord Takeda said. You carry Kenshin's reputation now. Do not dishonor the training he has given you. That evening, after the formalities had been completed and arrangements made, Daichi found himself alone with Kenshin in the Ronin's chamber for what would be one of their last nights at the estate. Tomorrow they would depart together, beginning their journey as master and retainer formally bound. You did beautifully today. Kenshin pulled Daichi into his arms. I was proud of you. You faced your fear, and performed flawlessly under pressure. That takes courage, Daichi. I did it for you. Daichi buried his face in Kenshin's chest. For us. I could not lose you, master. Could not go back to being invisible after knowing what it feels like to belong to someone. You will never be invisible again. Kenshin tilted Daichi's face up, kissing him with tender intensity. You are mine now, formally bound to me, and I take care of what belongs to me. We will travel together, fight together, build a life together. You have earned your place beside me, Daichi. Never doubt that. They made love that night with new meaning, celebrating not just their physical connection, but the formalization of their bond. Daichi surrendered completely to Kenshin's touch, letting himself be claimed and cherished, and afterward lay in his master's arms, feeling more complete than he had ever imagined possible. The journey that followed was hard in ways Daichi had not fully anticipated. Life on the road was nothing like the comfortable estate existence he had known. They slept in rough accommodations or under stars, ate simple food when they could find it, traveled long distances on foot through varied terrain. Kenshin took contracts in different provinces, selling his sword to lords who needed temporary warriors for specific campaigns or training purposes. But despite the hardships, Daichi had never been happier. He belonged somewhere, to someone. He had purpose that went beyond performing invisible tasks. He was Kenshin's retainer, devoted and proud of that service. And in private moments, stolen between duties and travel, he was also Kenshin's lover, treasured and desired in ways that filled the emptiness that had plagued him for years. Their bond deepened during months of travel. They learned each other's patterns, preferences, ways of thinking. Daichi continued his training, growing more skilled with each passing week. Kenshin taught him not just fighting techniques, but strategy, tactics, how to read situations and people. Shaped him into someone formidable, not just physically, but mentally. They fought together when contracts required it, and Daichi learned to trust Kenshin's positioning implicitly, to move in tandem with his master like they shared one mind. The synchronization was beautiful, deadly, proof of their connection, and in private they explored each other with ever-deepening intimacy. Kenshin remained dominant, claiming and controlling, but also remarkably attentive to Daichi's needs. Their physical relationship was intense, sometimes rough when Daichi begged for it, sometimes tender when emotional vulnerability required gentleness. Always it was honest, both of them stripped bare in ways that went beyond mere nakedness. Winter found them in a mountain province where Kenshin had been contracted to help defend against bandits harassing trade routes. They spent weeks in challenging terrain, tracking and engaging raiders, and Daichi proved himself repeatedly in combat. His skills had developed to the point where he was genuinely useful rather than a liability, and he felt pride in that accomplishment. One evening, after a successful engagement where they had driven off a bandit group and recovered stolen goods, they made camp in a sheltered valley. Kenshin built a fire while Daichi tended minor wounds they had both sustained. The work was familiar now, comfortable, domestic in its intimacy. You have exceeded every expectation I had when I first agreed to train you, Kenshin said while Daichi carefully cleaned a cut on his forearm. I thought I was taking on an enthusiastic student. I did not anticipate finding a partner. Partner. Daichi repeated the word, testing its weight. Not just retainer or student. Not just those things. No. Kenshin caught his hand, bringing it to his lips. You are my partner in every way that matters, Daichi. We fight together, travel together, share our lives together. I rely on you as much as you rely on me. That is partnership, not just service. Warmth bloomed in Daichi's chest. I never imagined I could have this. Never thought someone like me could matter this much to someone like you. You matter more than you know. Kenshin pulled him closer. You gave me something to care about beyond mere survival. Something to fight for beyond just selling my sword. You are my purpose now, Daichi, as much as I am yours. They made love that night beside the fire, surrounded by winter wilderness. and Daichi felt complete in ways that transcended physical satisfaction. He had found his place in the world, not through birth or luck, but through determination and willingness to submit completely to someone worthy of that submission. Years passed. Daichi grew from enthusiastic student into genuinely skilled warrior. His reputation grew alongside Kenshin's, and eventually they were sought out as a pair, rather than just hiring Kenshin alone. They became known for their synchronization in combat, their unwavering loyalty to each other, their effectiveness. But more importantly, they built a life together that satisfied both of them, found ways to balance Kenshin's dominance with Daichi's need to be cherished, navigated the complexities of their relationship with honesty and trust, created something rare and precious, a partnership that worked precisely because they understood what each other needed and willingly provided it. Sometimes, lying in Kenshin's arms after intimacy, Daichi would think back to the lonely servant who had stood in courtyards scrubbing stone while watching life happen to other people. That version of himself felt impossibly distant now, like a story about someone else entirely. "What are you thinking about?" Kenshin would ask, sensing his contemplative mood. "About how far I have come." Daichi would answer honestly. "About how different my life is now compared to what it was. About how grateful I am that you saw me when I was invisible to everyone else." "You were never invisible," Kenshin would correct gently. "You were just waiting for the right person to look. And I am grateful too, Daichi. Grateful that you were brave enough to reach for what you wanted. Grateful that you submitted to me completely. Grateful that you are mine, always yours." Daichi would confirm, and mean it with every fiber of his being. "For as long as you will have me, master." "Forever then," Kenshin would say, and seal the promise with a kiss that tasted of commitment and belonging and home. Daichi had begged to be rough, had pleaded to earn his place, and Kenshin had granted both requests with the understanding that true strength comes not from resisting vulnerability, but from embracing it completely. Through submission, Daichi had found power. Through surrender, he had discovered freedom. Through belonging entirely to someone worthy of such devotion, he had finally become someone who mattered. If this story touched your heart, showing that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit what we truly need and trust someone strong enough to give it to us, then please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Because stories like this remind us that our worth is not measured by where we start, but by our willingness to transform ourselves for something, someone worth fighting for. And that sometimes the deepest connection comes from complete honesty about our desires, even when those desires require us to surrender control to someone we trust implicitly. Share this with someone who needs to remember that asking for what you need is not weakness, but the strongest thing you can do.